Everyone, hope that you're all doing well today. So today we're back with another full discussion video because for the first time in a while, Riot has released a new dev blog that I believe is worth talking about. Since the Viego release, new content from Riot has been relatively low and Riot's been pretty quiet about a lot of things, but since we finally have something worth talking about, I wanted to make a video for it. So essentially what this video is about is increasing the number of bans in draft mode, solo queue, as well as pro play in League of Legends. So what I want to do is I want to go through the article. It's relatively short, but I want to go through the article piece by piece and then talk about should Riot increase it from 10 to 20 bans, give the current state of health of the ban system, as well as improvements that could be made possibly, and my personal opinions on this. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into this and start talking about it. So, can you add more bans to Champ Select, please? Bans are a valuable way for every player to have a choice and some control over stopping a particularly bad matchup or champion that they believe is too strong. Players sometimes ask if we could increase the number of bans each game. When we look at the trade-offs of going from 10 to 20 bans, 2 bans per person, it seems like we get more overall drawbacks than gains. Now, just to address the 10 to 20 real quick and why they would pick that number. Initially back Season 7 and prior, before they increased from 6 to 10, the first pick would ban either the most overpowered or the most requested bans, and it would be 3 bans per team. So going from 6 to 10 would make it even, so every person in a ban phase gets 1 ban. So keeping the number even, only to keep it fair, going from 10 to 20, each player would get 2 bans rather than going from 10 to 12 or 10 to 14, where only the first 2 slots, if you lucked out in getting placed there, would get 2 bans each, and then the 3, 4, and 5 players would only get 1 ban themselves. So doing this is to keep it basically fair for the player base, which I agree with. Plus sides to increasing bans. More agency and control over frustrating or particularly bad matchups. Totally agree with this. And small strategy increases, building a sharp team comp and considering the counters and ban choices adds some depth to the pregame. This is really here, I think, for pro play and maybe high MMR. I don't really agree with this for mid and low elo because like people are trying to play their lane and their role with their champion pool. There's really not any strategy going on in terms of like building a sharp team comp. I think this is just more here as filler and to address pro play necessarily. Now, downsides to increasing bans. Increase complexity and duration of champion select. We already have a fairly long and complex pregame, and we would rather get players into the game quicker with less possibility for restarts. There are 2 ways to fix this first point. First of all, lower the amount of time it takes to pick and ban champions. There is absolutely no reason, if you increase the number of bans, that it should take that long. Also, if you have a working client, it doesn't matter if you're playing on a lower end PC or a higher end PC. I understand that the duration for the client and the champion select on the client, obviously, can in part be to people who might need an extra minute to load. But if you have a client that works, guess what? You don't have to worry about this. This would fix itself if the client itself would work. Do I personally have any problems with the client currently? No, but I know a lot of people historically have, and I think still do. So if you actually fix the client and got it to work properly, this first part wouldn't be an issue. Second, reduced ability to play who you want. This part I can actually kind of agree with. One of the direct trade-offs between banning difficult or frustrating matchups is that the champ you wanted to play may get banned. This can be especially devastating for newer players who only feel comfortable with a small amount of champions or players who main champions or classes who tend to be banned out more EX assassins. Now, from Silver 1 down to Iron and Unranked, if this number still holds true, I believe that area of the player base is 60% of the total player base. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily on 1 or 2 servers or worldwide, but I do know that majority of the players who play League of Legends are Silver 1 down to Iron and Unranked. So that whole champion pool, I can understand direct trade-offs between banning difficult or frustrating matchups with the champ that you wanted to play. It does increase the likelihood of that happening. However, one thing we will get to is the number of champions in the game and how this affects the number of bans, and, you know, with there being 100 and... how many is it? 154 champions in the game. might not be a bad idea to start thinking about increasing that ban number. And finally, disastrous edge cases. Many of our positions and champion classes could be completely banned out with more bans. We think overall it would be bad for the game if all marksmen, enchanters, assassins, or tanks were unable to be played. Now, this one I'm a little iffy on for a couple reasons. First of all, marksmen. There are 2 marksmen that are really overpowered and viable, especially right now as 11.4. Enchanters, yeah, I can kind of understand, but then they can just be replaced with tank supports. Assassins, I mean, Kali and Cat should be getting banned anyway, but that's just my opinion. And then obviously, I think there's enough tanks that they're not so viable that they would all get banned. So I think, even though this is talking about edge cases where there would be situations where 20 tanks would get banned, or 20 assassins, or 20 Lulus, which I wouldn't mind, or 20 more, like there is no way 20 marksmen are getting banned. Okay, that's just not going to happen. Okay, that all of this falls into the meta. Okay, so maybe this would happen once in a blue moon, but I just don't see this happening in terms of disastrous edge cases. But what I will say is that with the reduced ability to play who you want, I do think this can be rectified if Riot would just stick to their promise of role diversity. And so there are a couple examples of toxic role diversity that I think in the past that I can think of as a top laner. Obviously, the Soraka and Sona meta, which lasted for all of a week. And then, I don't know if you guys remember back in Season 8, but the Tank Victor top lane was absolutely horrible to deal with, where basically he would rush Iceborne Gauntlet and then rely on base damages, and even if you were somewhat mobile of a top laner, you just couldn't do anything about it because of all the peel and slows that he had. And so that got nerfed into the ground, thank God. But I feel like when it comes to role diversity and champions, if Riot can figure that out, then you wouldn't have to worry about the edge cases, basically. So rounding this off, back when we increased the number of bans from 6 to 10, we felt there was clear positive net value. Obviously, because if my math is right from the wiki, back in Season 7, there was 137 champs, so going from 6 to 10, just off of numbers alone, was a very good idea. The complexity of champ select actually went down, and we moved up to a sweet spot of every player gets 1 ban. It didn't put any classes at risk of being totally banned out while still increasing the overall level of player choice. Yep, I mean, this part I 100% agree with, no issues with. Returning to the question, increasing the number of bans in League today feels more heavily weighted towards the negatives, but like everything, we will continue to reevaluate, and our opinion may change in the future. So, let's get to my opinions, okay? First thing that comes to mind with this is do I think they should increase it from 10 to 20? Not yet. And the reason being is that with there being 154 champions in the game, and let's say 3.5 seasons ago there being 137, I still think 10 bans is okay. I think once we get closer to 200 champions is when they should think about ramping it up to 20, because 200 champions in the game, especially in a game like League of Legends, this is an insane number of characters that are available. So being able to ban out 10% of that, I think, is a good number. Now, as far as the current health of the ban system is concerned, there are a couple improvements I think Riot could make right now that would also kind of retcon some inauthentic things that they initially did. And so, first of all, I think what they should do is they should get rid of no ban. Basically, if you're going to continue to increase the champion pool, then obviously having the option of 1 less ban in game would be or having the option of 1 less ban in game right now it gets a little bit more toxic every time 1 more champion gets added to the game, because if you have 10 bans and then somebody clicks the no ban, then it drops from 10 to 9. Something else I think that is inauthentic of Riot with the new ban system, or I should say upping it from 6 to 10, that they did comparing solo queue to pro play, as well as draft mode, is you not getting, or every game not having 10 unique bans, basically. So in pro play, every game there are always 10 different champions getting banned. no two sides can double ban, basically. So, like, you can't red side and blue side ban Darius at the same time, which is something that happens in solo queue. And to that, I would say every game needs to have 10 bans at this point, because basically what you're doing is even though the maximum value is 10, that's not happening every game. Now, I think only once have I ever been in the situation where both sides had identical bans. Even though that is a fringe type case, I do feel as though that forcing 10 champions would, technically speaking, increase the number of bans, because even though 10 is the max value, forcing the max value to be met every game throws away the risk of at least one double ban happening, because then what happens is you have this floating number of bans between 5 and 10 in addition to the no ban, which means that potentially speaking you can only have 6 unique bans per game, or 8 unique bans per game. And so do I think 20 is a little much right now? Yes. But do I think retconning what Riot initially did and getting rid of the no ban, as well as forcing every game to have 10 unique bans, is something that would actually increase the health of the ban system and get closer to what some players might be asking for with the increase here. Also, one other health change that I wish Riot would make in terms of wanting to play a unique champion is I wish they would replace blind pick with what is on the PBE. Now, if you don't have a PBE account, the way Norms works is draft mode without bans. And so what I think they should do is get rid of blind pick. And if you want to play a specific champion, then have a draft mode that doesn't have bans, but then also doesn't have a restriction on unique champion played. So that way you can still get your role, you can still get the champion that you want to play, and if somebody picks your champion, then you can have a dual matchup up in the top lane. So if two people want to play Garen, they can still play Garen without having to worry about getting banned. Also, I think this would reduce toxicity a little bit on new champions getting released, because new champions get banned immediately after they get released, and so that can result in a lot of dodges. Now, obviously, everyone wants to play the new champion, so that can result in more dodges as well, but at the very least, if you replace blind pick with a banless draft mode that allows both sides to pick identical champions and roles, obviously not exceeding 2, and then I feel like that would also give some increased health to draft mode at least. So, well, here we are, 14 minutes later, guys. Here's my 2 cents on the bans. Do I think Riot should do it? Not yet, but do I think they should do it when they get closer to 200? I do. Thank you guys very much for watching, and as always, we will see each other again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.